This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, Ash, Christopher Mitchell and 212th Trooper. Our story begins once again with a party, though this time at the Tonks household, as they along with Harry, Sirius and Remus have gathered to celebrate Dora completing her aura training. Naturally, everyone is incredibly proud of her, as the process is renowned for being arduous and designed to weed out all but the most skilled and diligent, with Dora's training having been particularly difficult as she'd been assigned to study under Moody, who is perhaps the toughest taskmaster ever when it comes to ensuring his students are constantly vigilant. All the same, Dora had passed with flying colours, and as everyone raises a glass to her, Sirius teases his niece that her great-aunt Warburger would die of shame if she knew Dora had become a dark wizard catcher, rather than sticking to the family business and being a dark wizard, while making it abundantly clear that anything that would cause that old harpy shame is just fine with him. Wanting to change the subject, as Sirius's comment had obviously been referencing her sisters and Regulus, all of whom have the potential to put a dampener on this happy day, Andromeda laughingly tells her cousin that she heard a rumour that he would also be taking on some work that would make his mother sick. Though laughing as well, Sirius waves this off, saying he's too much of a layabout for any sort of real job, and besides, nothing he did could be as impressive as having an aura in the family. Taking the hint, Andromeda muses that it must have just been a rumour then, though her eyes convey a very different meaning as she heads into the kitchen to fetch a cake. Following Dora's party, Harry, Remus and Sirius return home, settling in for a very peaceful and largely uneventful summer. Though they had planned to catch up over break, Harry unfortunately sees very little of Ron or Hermione, as Ron's family had won the Daily Prophet Grand Prize Galleon draw, with them using the money to have a vacation in Egypt visiting Bill, the eldest son, while Hermione and her family are holidaying in France. Nonetheless, both do remember to write Harry for his birthday, sending him gifts from abroad and promises to catch up on September 1st at platform 9 3/4. Good to their word, when Harry and his family arrive at King's Cross, the Weasley and Granger clans are there to meet them, with them loading up their luggage and urging the kids to have a good year at school. That is aside from Sirius, who simply flashes Harry a mischievous grin as he tells him, "See you soon," before giving the boy a hug. This oddity only continues when the train starts leaving the platform, as when Harry looks out the window to wave goodbye to his two parental figures, he only sees Remus on the platform. All the same, he quickly puts this out of his mind, as he has much catching up to do with his best friends, swapping stories with them all the way to Hogsmeade Station while gorging themselves on chocolate frogs, in what might be Harry's most pleasant trip on the Hogwarts Express so far. Following this, the trio take the self-pulling carriages up to the castle for the sorting and start-of-term feast, though when they arrive they receive quite a surprise, as seated at the high table is none other than Sirius, who playfully raises a goblet and winks, before going back to what he was previously doing, actively speaking over Snape to ruin his conversation. The reason for Sirius' attendance soon becomes clear, as during Dumbledore's speech, it is revealed that he has taken up the post of Defense Against the Dark Arts Professor, while Hagrid has been promoted to Care of Magical Creatures Teacher, with both announcements earning applause from the trio. As the feast draws to a close and everyone is told to return to bed, Harry approaches his godfather to question this appointment, with Sirius explaining that after that Lockhart git quit, Dumbledore needed someone to fill in, and considering he is ex-Order of the Phoenix, not to mention how well he did in the subject at school, he was happy to help out, since this way he'll be able to ensure Harry stays out of trouble, a statement that makes the boy laugh, as he replies that he'll be on his best behaviour, before jokingly calling Sirius Professor. The next morning, classes begin bright and early, which for Harry, Ron and Hermione means their first Muggle studies lesson. For the most part, it is interesting, if a little theoretical for Harry and Ron's liking, as they spend the whole class talking about why Muggle paintings and photos remain stationary at all times. As a Muggle-born witch, Hermione naturally already knows this, with Harry asking why she's even taking this class. Though studious as ever, Hermione replies that it's fascinating to study Muggles from a wizarding perspective, a claim which makes Ron scoff, as he suggests that she probably just wanted an easy subject. As a result of this assertion, Hermione does not speak to the redhead all throughout Transfiguration, only seeming to defrost as they head into the grounds for Hagrid's first Care of Magical Creatures lesson. To the trio's surprise, Sirius is waiting for them there, with him grinning that he had a free period and always liked this class, so figured he'd see what Hagrid has in store, a claim that rings a bit odd, though having no objection to the man's company, the group approach a paddock Hagrid has set up, which contains a group of peculiar beasts who appear to be part horse and part eagle. Welcoming his students warmly, Hagrid explains that these are called hippogriffs, before asking if anyone would like to assist him showing how to interact with one. Being a bit more sure of himself than in canon thanks to Sirius's influence, Harry happily accepts, stepping forth and on Hagrid's instruction bowing low and being permitted to approach the grey hippogriff named Buckbeak. Though it seems this is not all the large Care of Magical Creatures teacher has in mind, as he next urges Harry to ride him, something the boy has some misgivings about courtesy of Remus's common sense, though with Sirius and his friends watching, he hoists himself onto Buckbeak's back and takes flight. While at first is a rather uncomfortable experience for one used to brooms, once he acclimates, Harry finds this quite exhilarating as he does a lap of the paddock then touches down again, this time to cheers from all watching. Emboldened by this, the other students then attempt to emulate his success, with many including Malfoy earning bows from their hippogriffs. Though, it is here that disaster strikes, as smirking haughtily, Malfoy jeers that he bets Buckbeak isn't dangerous at all, while calling him a big ugly brute. At once the beast rears, his claws flashing just like his eyes, and having taken up a position near Harry, Sirius leaps into action, transforming into the Great Black Dog and using his enhanced speed to tackle Malfoy to the ground, just as Buckbeak's talons slash at where the boy had been a moment before. However, being a world-class prat, Malfoy is not grateful for Sirius saving him, instead choosing to use this as an excuse to ruin the new professor's reputation, having heard plenty from his mother about her blood traitor cousin. To this end, he begins howling about how Professor Black mauled him, pointing to the small rips in his robes from the fall and where Sirius's claws pierce the fabric, while Sirius himself leaps off the boy and growls him to stop being ridiculous. However, seeing the rise this is getting out of the man, Malfoy just plays it up more, until Hagrid calls off the class and carries the blonde boy to the hospital wing, with Sirius storming after him and ordering Harry, Ron, and Hermione not to follow. Harry does not see Sirius for the rest of the day after that, with him not even turning up for dinner. Consulting the Marauders map when he gets back to his dorm, the black-haired boy finds his godfather not in his office either, but instead in Dumbledore's, though he and the headmaster are not the only inhabitants of the room, as standing between them is none other than Lucius Malfoy. Speaking of the Malfoys, Draco chooses the next morning's potions class to make his grand reappearance, limping into the dungeon while pretending to hold his wounded chest. A farce if ever there was one, since as Ron is quick to point out, Madame Pomfrey can heal cuts in an instant, not that he believes Malfoy got any thanks to Sirius. When Malfoy starts recounting the story of how he was viciously attacked to his Slytherin cronies, Harry feels like he can take no more, though in this he is wrong, as a moment later Snape pipes up, making sly asides that the new professor is a violent brute, with that being what pushes Harry over the edge, as he snaps them both to shut up, unwilling to stand idly by as the two people he hates most slander Sirius. Unsurprisingly, Snape does not take this outburst well, deducting 20 points from Gryffindor for disrupting the lesson and giving Harry a detention for speaking so disrespectfully to a member of staff. This leaves the black-haired boy fuming, though thankfully, Sirius class is next, with his bright, airy classroom being a welcome reprieve from the dank, dismal dungeon. When everyone arrives, Sirius welcomes them all with an eager smile, evidently excited for this opportunity, as he explains that since he's been hired to teach them how to defend themselves against the dark arts, it's high time they learn some defensive magic, as well as a couple of offensive spells so they can hex any blighter giving them trouble. This quickly gets the students talking, as the idea of learning how to duel is something everyone has wanted since last year's ill-fated dueling club, or rather, almost everyone. As raising her hand, Hermione questions if this is in the curriculum, since the standard book of spells grade 3 doesn't have any dueling spells listed. Though grinning roguishly, Sirius replies that while Hermione is the brightest witch of her age she's ever met, she sometimes thinks a bit too restrictively when it comes to these things, since if she meets a Death Eater in a dark alley, the excuse, "I'm sorry but the established curriculum hasn't taught me how to fight yet," won't cut it. So it's important she and everyone else learn how to defend themselves as early as possible. He then has his students form two lines facing each other with instructions to practice the Jelly Legs jinx, since while it can't hold off Voldemort, it might at least give the kids a head start on running away while their opponent is unable to walk for fear of collapsing. As the mention of Death Eaters had caused anxious murmuring among those who had grown up in the wizarding world, the casual and brazen way in which Sirius invokes Voldemort's name earns him several gasps, while up the back of the room, Parvati shrieks. Nonetheless, at their new teacher's instruction they begin, watching first as he demonstrates the incantation and then attempting to mimic it. As Hermione had said, such a spell is a bit above their year level, meaning most of the class do struggle at first, though before long, they do start to get it, with Hermione herself being the first to turn Ron's legs to jelly, earning her praise from Sirius and 20 points for Gryffindor, making up for those Harry had lost. All in all, it is a good lesson, with everyone feeling excited for the next one as they can't wait to see what other spells Professor Black will teach them. However, before he, Ron, and Hermione can file out of the room, Sirius asks Harry to hang back, with the boy wondering if he's done something wrong at the grimness lacing his godfather's tone. Taking a seat on his desk and beckoning Harry to do the same, Sirius informs him that Malfoy's claiming he, Sirius, assaulted him in the Care of Magical Creatures class, which has given Lucius Malfoy cause to convene the Board of Governors for a hearing around whether he should keep his job or not. Furiously, Harry calls this unfair, though with a bark-like laugh, Sirius replies that it's not all bad, since he might make Hogwarts history as the shortest-lasting professor, which is still preferable to his ancestor Phineas Nigellus Black, who has been immortalized as the school's least popular headmaster. However, refusing to let his godfather pass this off as a joke, Harry angrily asks how Sirius can let them do this to him, and while the bearded man admits that he'd like nothing more than to hit that little twat Malfoy with a sack full of nifflers until he admits that he wasn't actually attacked, he knows that wouldn't solve anything. Likewise, he wants Harry to promise him that whatever he hears, whatever anyone does, he won't take the bait like he did in potions, since the last thing he wants is for his problems to interfere with Harry's education, as that's far more important than this job. Seeing how much this means to Sirius, Harry reluctantly agrees, and so pushes the impending hearing out of his mind for the time being, focusing on his studies over the next few weeks, as well as Wood's grueling Quidditch practices, since with it being the Keeper's last year, he wants to hold on to the Quidditch Cup no matter the cost. Finally, an event comes around that Harry's been looking forward to ever since receiving the permission slip at the end of his second year, the first trip to Hogsmeade. Naturally, Sirius signed the slip, meaning Harry can go without issue, though surprisingly his godfather decides to tag along with the trio, offering to be their guide, and stating that it's been far too long since he explored the village. Taking Sirius up on the offer, the trio follow as he shows them around Honeydew, Zonkos, and most importantly the Shrieking Shack, which Harry has been eager to see, having grown up hearing all the stories of the marauders' monthly expeditions whenever Remus was afflicted with his furry little problem. Finally, they stop off at the Three Broomsticks for some butterbeers, with it being an undeniably good day, made even better by the Halloween feast that evening, which for once is not marred by either trolls in the dungeon or petrified cats. Following this, life returns to normal, with the first Quidditch match of the season being between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, due to Malfoy still milking his quote-unquote injury. While the Gryffindor team are confident they can outplay Diggory and his lot, their real opponent proves to be the weather, with a terrible rainstorm making it almost impossible to see while flying. Thankfully, here Hermione has a solution, suggesting the Impervious Charm, which allows Harry and his teammates to see clearly. With this impediment dealt with, it is only a matter of time before Harry is able to find and catch the snitch, putting Gryffindor in the lead for both the Quidditch and House Cup, with this naturally resulting in a raucous party in Gryffindor Tower that evening. Meanwhile, on the academic side of things, Sirius continues proving himself an exceptional teacher, quickly becoming most students' favourite, as his lessons aren't simply limited to teaching simple jinxes and hexes. Instead, he uses his keen mind to instruct the kids on elements of a duel that go beyond shooting sparks at each other, such as when he teaches them how to throw a punch, stating that most wizards never see such muggle tactics coming, which will give them the element of surprise. Additionally, he also shows them how to cast a disillusionment charm, since sometimes the best way to defend from a fight is to simply never be seen by your opponent. Though in truth, Harry, Ron, and Hermione suspect that Sirius's knowledge of the spell comes not from avoiding dark wizards, but instead teachers during his time here as a student. However, it seems not everyone is as thrilled by Sirius's work, as before long the date of his disciplinary hearing is announced, with it being set for the afternoon of Friday the 3rd of December. Wanting to support his godfather, Harry volunteers to go in with him and be a witness, since he saw everything that happened, and will testify that Malfoy was being a prat, and offer Ron and Hermione also extend without hesitation, though here Sirius refuses them, stating the governors are all in Lucius Malfoy's pocket, so the verdict has already been decided. The only thing being seen with him will achieve is to put a target on each of their backs, so he would prefer to face this alone. While the group do accept this reasoning, Sirius' choice of wording does give Harry an idea, so that when the day of the hearing rolls around, he along with Ron and Hermione slip under the cloak and follow him into the Great Hall, where the 12 governors all sit at the high table. At once, Harry's blood boils when he sees Lucius Malfoy seated in Dumbledore's spot, smirking malevolently down at Sirius. Though feeling his friend's hands upon his wrists as though they expect him to jinx Malfoy Sr. from under the cloak, Harry stays where he is, waiting to see how this plays out. Unfortunately, the best word to describe how the start of this hearing plays out is badly, as the first order of business is for a smirking Snape to approach the defendant with a goblet which Lucius instructs him to drink from, as the potions master was kind enough to brew something that will ensure all proceedings are carried out justly and accurately. Refusing to be cowed by either old enemy, Sirius retorts that Snively should have used that time to brew himself some shampoo since he has nothing to hide. All the same, he does go to drink. That is until the double doors of the Great Hall fly open and Dumbledore strides into view, instructing his staff member to wait, stating that as he intends to speak on his behalf, some of that drink should be saved for him, a declaration that makes Lucius Malfoy scowl, while causing the other governors to look thoughtful, not that Harry has any clue why. All the same, when Sirius and Dumbledore have polished off the contents of the goblet, the hearing itself is able to begin, the first witness being none other than Lucius Malfoy himself, who gives an incredibly biased account of the proceedings in which Sirius is described as a violent beast of a man whose reckless negligence makes him unfit to supervise, let alone teach children. Throughout this account, no one challenges Malfoy despite the obvious unfairness of him operating as both lead prosecutor and head judge, making it patently obvious to Harry, Ron, Hermione, and anyone else who might be watching that Sirius's claims about Lucius having a stranglehold on the board are entirely true. Only when this is done does the defense get a chance to speak, with Sirius doing his best to present the events as they actually occurred, though even this is not free of Malfoy's bias, as in contrast to the uninterrupted account the blonde man gave, his dark-haired opposition can barely get a word out, let alone a full sentence before he is grilled relentlessly by Lucius in a transparent attempt to dissect his testimony for any discrepancy or incriminating word choice that could be used to his advantage. For the most part, Sirius acquits himself admirably, being an intelligent and well-spoken man, whose own experience as a trickster allows him to recognize and subvert any traps the elder Malfoy attempts to lay in his path, even turning a few back on Lucius, so that before long, a couple of the governors are chuckling behind their hands while their leader's scowl cements itself so firmly on his face that it will be a wonder if Lucius can ever smile again. However, this all changes when Sirius is asked the seemingly innocuous question of why he was even present for the fateful care of magical creatures class at all. Good-naturedly, the defense professor shrugs that he always liked the subject and he likes Hagrid, so he wanted to see how his first class would be. Though evidently, this is not sufficient for Lucius Malfoy, who sulkily asks if this is the only reason. At once, an uncomfortable expression crosses the Animagus' face, like he is trying to will his lips to stay still. And spotting this, Hermione gasps that the goblet Mr. Malfoy made him drink from must have contained Veritaserum, the most powerful truth potion in the world, so now Sirius cannot lie or ignore any question posed to him. As usual, Hermione is right, as having lost the battle with his lips, Sirius states that he was at that class to look after Harry, grinning in a way that shows that this is precisely what he wanted to hear. Lucius leers the other governors heard it from Black's own mouth. Even someone as reckless as him thought that class was too dangerous for his own godson, and so felt compelled to chaperone. Seeing now that Lucius's sights were never set just on him, Sirius speaks up, clarifying that his decision had nothing to do with Hagrid or his teaching ability, but rather with the desire to keep an eye on Harry, since in the 2 years since he's attended Hogwarts, he has almost been killed by Voldemort twice, a fact he's sure Lucius knows all about, considering Voldemort's a close personal mate of his. Like during his first lesson, the brazen use of "he who must not be named's" name results in a panic among most of the governors, and even makes Ron look uncomfortable from under the cloak, though at the head of the table, Lucius remains stony still, the only sign that he's even registered Sirius' words being the growing pinkness on his pale skin that so resembles his son's when angered. Nonetheless, he does not rise to the accusation, instead simpering that he apologizes for the misunderstanding. Sirius doesn't distrust the half-breed, he just has no faith in Dumbledore to keep their children safe, his cruel eyes now falling upon the headmaster, who has said nothing throughout. In contrast to the blonde man's placid demeanor, Sirius barks at Lucius to stop trying to put words in his mouth, though chuckling as though he had not just suffered a grave insult. Dumbledore interjects, requesting that Professor Black allow him to take over from here, before politely asking the governors if he may begin his own testimony. Upon Malfoy's curt nod, the headmaster calmly recounts how it was in fact he who approached Sirius to work at Hogwarts, and dutiful as ever, the former Gryffindor had risen to the occasion without hesitation, a fact for which he is immensely grateful. Lip-curling, Lucius states that while this is all very laudable, he does not see what bearing it has on this tribunal. Though smiling in a way that makes those pale eyes of his twinkle, Dumbledore replies that he is simply trying to give evidence to the character and motives of Sirius Black. Now with that said, he would ask the governors to consider how such a man driven by loyalty and duty would react to the sight of not only a student under his care, but also his own kin through Lucius's wife Narcissa being in a position of danger. Such a man would surely leap into action and do all he could to protect that child. So while he agrees it may have been perhaps inadvisable for Sirius to lay hands, or rather paws on Draco, he was simply carrying out his duty of care as a professor in the best way he was able to in the moment. An admirable intent, which in Dumbledore's opinion deserves some consideration, and perhaps even leniency. When the headmaster is done speaking, the 12 wizards seated at the high table confer amongst themselves, and while Harry, Ron and Hermione cannot make out the exact words, their tone suggests the verdict could swing either way between Malfoy and Dumbledore, as some seem to be sympathetic to Sirius's attempted heroism, while others clearly feel it was beyond the pale to tackle a student. After a time, the last voice falls silent, and seeing no other testimony is required, Lucius calls for a vote on the motion to dismiss Professor Black. Naturally, his hand is the first to raise in favor, while two others quickly follow, and then after a moment of hesitancy, they are joined by another pair, making 5 in total. As this is still a minority, the motion fails, and smiling softly, Dumbledore proposes a counter-motion. Sirius may keep his job, though he will be on probation for the remainder of the school year. Evidently, this more tempered solution appeals to the governors, as with no hesitancy 7 hands raise into the air, with one of the strugglers from the previous vote also thrusting his hand up when it becomes clear the motion will pass, so that a majority vote of 8 to 4 the hearing is concluded. With this being the case, most of the board members prepare to leave, though this is not true for Lucius, who instead makes his way down from the dais to speak with Sirius and Dumbledore. Knowing this can't be good whatever it is, Harry, Ron and Hermione draw close to listen, with their hunch being proven correct almost immediately as the blonde man hisses that Black may have escaped justice thanks to Dumbledore's meddling, but he will still see to it that the same is not true for the other beast responsible for his son's injury. Figuring this is a jibe at Hagrid, Ron makes several obscene gestures at Malfoy under the cloak, though in contrast, Dumbledore placidly responds that he has no doubt Lucius will use whatever legal recourse is available to him, as is his right, though he hopes it does not become an obsession or vendetta. Sniffing haughtily at this sly rebuke, Lucius bids the two professors good day, then as he makes his way out of the Great Hall, the trio do likewise, ducking out and into a side room before pulling off the invisibility cloak. Looking over at Harry with a broad smile, Hermione comments that he must be relieved since Sirius is going to be able to keep his job after all, and while the boy does nod, there is a distance to it that neither of his friends can miss. Furrowing his brow, Ron asks his mate what's crawled up his cauldron since he'd have thought Harry would be over the moon. Though letting out a sigh, the black-haired youth replies that Ron heard Sirius in there. He only took this job since he thinks Harry needs watching while he's here at school. Placatingly, Hermione protests that she doesn't think that's necessarily true, reminding Harry of all the reasons Dumbledore gave for Sirius accepting, though in that moment the boy doesn't want to hear it and just wants to feel aggrieved, protesting that it's not just what he said in there, it's the fact he chaperoned their Hogsmeade visit and basically said as much at the start of term feast. Seeing this isn't going anywhere productive, Hermione suggests they drop the matter for now, since they really should be celebrating this win with Sirius. Though shaking his head sulkily, Harry declares that he's going to head back to the common room and read for a bit. This pattern of behaviour persists for the remainder of the weekend, with Harry eating breakfast late and dinner early so that he and Sirius don't cross paths, though such methods of avoidance can only last so long, as they still have class early the following week, after which Sirius asks Harry to stay behind once again. Just from the boy's reaction, a reluctance bordering on annoyance, the bearded man is able to confirm his hunch, and so skipping the now pointless question of if Harry is avoiding him, he jumps straight to why. Being in no mood to spare his godfather's feelings, Harry answers honestly, explaining that he, Ron and Hermione snuck into the hearing last week and overheard him say he only took this job so he can babysit him. Stifling his annoyance at this overt defiance of his instruction to stay away from the hearing, Sirius instead protests that he didn't say that, and it's not babysitting, he's just looking out for him and trying to keep him out of trouble. Unfortunately, this is just the wrong thing to say, as Harry fiercely snaps that it's a bit rich when by his age Sirius's dad and Remus were doing nothing but getting into trouble. Now a touch annoyed as well, Sirius growls that it's not the same. The worst trouble he and his mates got into ended up with detention and chewing out from McGonagall. Harry could be killed. It almost has been for 2 years in a row because Voldemort and his lot want him dead. Merlin's balls, how does he not get that? Still heatedly, the black-haired boy replies that he gets it, but Voldemort's always going to be after him. So what's Sirius going to do when he's 40 and has a family of his own? Curl up at the foot of the bed as a dog every night in case he sees a Death Eater in the shadows? Letting out a barking scoff, Sirius retorts that of course not, but that's ages away. For now, Harry's still a kid and he needs someone who actually understands the danger he's in to look out for him. Unsurprisingly, this earns a petulant glare from the teen, as he scowls that he understands the danger perfectly, since in case Sirius forgot, he fought Voldemort twice without him and came away just fine both times. The real issue is that his godfather doesn't trust him to take care of himself, since he still thinks of him as that little kid who needed help mounting his first broom. At these words, Sirius pauses, and while only a momentary thing, Harry takes it as all the confirmation he needs, gathering up his books and storming out with a grunt that he'll be late for Muggle studies, unless Sirius wants to come along and make sure he doesn't get a paper cut from the textbook and bleed out. In the wake of this conversation, there is an unmistakable tension between godfather and godson, which Ron and Hermione as Harry's closest friends recognize immediately, though wisely do their best to stay out of, treating both Harry and Sirius normally, and not discussing the situation unless it's brought up first, which naturally it is before long, as Harry attempts to canvass them for support. However, as you will soon learn, there is little to be found, as Hermione continues to insist that he shouldn't take this as an insult since it's just Sirius expressing his concern for his well-being, while Ron shruggingly tells his best buddy that parents are just mental that way, since if she could, his mum would be here at Hogwarts all year round keeping an eye on them, though admittedly, mostly on Fred and George. Seeing as how his best friends are less supportive than he had hoped, Harry begins spending more and more time with Hagrid, as the gamekeeper is always willing to lend a sympathetic ear and a giant mug of blisteringly hot tea, an activity he is able to engage in more and more as the term comes to an end and the Christmas holidays begin. Due to him and Sirius already being here, it had been decided weeks ago that they would stay at Hogwarts for Christmas this year, with Remus coming up to join them so they could all have Christmas lunch together. Unfortunately, due to Harry and Sirius's stoush, it is a rather frosty affair. As while they do eat together and even wish each other Happy Christmas, this is the full extent of their interaction. Speaking exclusively to Remus, was the unenviable position of being in between them, both in terms of where he is seated and his perspective, as he can see where both Harry and Sirius are coming from, though also knows from long experience that they are remarkably alike in their stubbornness, meaning it is up to him to try and bridge the divide. To this end, when lunch is concluded and the pair have gone their separate ways, he starts by taking a walk through the grounds with Harry, and while at first the conversation is light, catching each other up on what's gone on since they parted, it does not take long for the topic of Sirius to come up. Dutifully, Remus listens as Harry vents his frustrations around his godfather, for asking if surely the mustachioed man agrees with him that Sirius is being unreasonable, to which Lupin answers that while he understands why Harry is upset, before judging him too harshly, it might be worth looking at things from Padfoot's point of view. While this is sound advice in theory, it has two major flaws. First, Remus is speaking to an emotional teenager, meaning no amount of logic is likely to get through. And second, said emotional teenager is the child of two of the most hard-headed people he has ever known, and was raised by one of the most willful wizards he has ever known, with the result therefore being a rather flat refusal, as the boy scowls that he should have known Remus would take Sirius's side. Unfortunately, things don't go much better with Sirius himself, as while sharing a glass of fire whiskey with his old friend that evening, Remus attempts to get him to consider Harry's perspective since he is a teenager now and so requires a lighter touch, only to be met with dogged resistance as Sirius growls that he'd have thought Mooney of all people would understand why he's doing this. Smiling softly, Remus replies that he does, though he just asks that his friend be mindful of the damage he may be doing to his relationship with Harry and his desire to keep him safe, with this earning him a scowl so reminiscent of the one their adoptive son gave him earlier that it is difficult not to laugh. Nonetheless, when Remus departs by flue the next morning, it is with seemingly no progress, as Sirius continues to prowl the grounds brooding as both a man and a dog, while Harry continues to spend his holiday cloistered in Hagrid's hut. It is during one of these visits that Hagrid receives an owl with a letter bearing the Ministry of Magic seal, and upon reading its contents, every part of him not covered by hair or beard goes ghostly pale. Worriedly, Harry asks his giant friend what's the matter, and clearly being too upset to speak, Hagrid thrusts his dustbin lid-sized hand into the boy's face so he may read the letter as well. At once, Harry understands the big man's distress, as the letter is a summons to appear before the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures, as it seems Lucius Malfoy has lodged a complaint against Buckbeak, deeming him a menace since he was going to attack Draco. Recognizing that this is the vindictive man's attempt at a consolation prize since he couldn't get Sirius, Harry quickly vows to help Hagrid prepare a defense, with Ron and Hermione doing likewise when the black-haired boy shares the news with them that night at dinner. Thankfully, with most of the school still away, they have free run of the library to undertake their research on magical law and previous rulings by the committee that might be able to help Buckbeak, though unfortunately this will not last, as a few days later the new term begins, and with it comes the start of Wood's new training regiment, having Harry and the rest of the team practicing 5 nights a week, since the Gryffindor Ravenclaw Quidditch match is fast approaching. Not only that, but classes start back at full throttle, with the professors seemingly having little concern for their students' sluggishness coming off Christmas, with some such as Snape actively reveling in giving them difficult homework assignments right off the bat. This naturally forces Harry and Sirius back into proximity, and while they do not argue, there is a distance to their interactions much like there was at Christmas, with it appearing to the world that they are student and professor, nothing more. As a result of these compiling stresses, Harry soon finds himself physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted, with his studies and work on Buckbeak's case suffering as a result. Recognizing this, Hermione suggests that perhaps he should ask for some help taking the load off, though knowing who she means, the bespectacled boy tersely refuses, stating that he will not go begging Sirius for help and giving him the satisfaction of seeing that he can't handle himself like he thought. Angrily, Hermione protests that he's being ridiculous, though seeing that his best friend won't budge, and all this will achieve is another argument, Ron encourages her to drop it, since they're wasting time, and they've got a dozen more rolls of old case law to go over before bed. However, one person they do reach out to is Remus, whose history with the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures proves an absolute boon, with him supplying them with several pieces of key legislation that, while mostly applying to werewolves, do outline the circumstances under which a creature is deemed a threat to human life and can be terminated by the Ministry. By all accounts, Buckbeak does not fall under that category, considering he never touched Malfoy or Sirius, with this serving as a relief to the trio and Hagrid so that when the day of the Quidditch match arrives, Harry is able to devote his complete attention to it. Here Wood's insane training schedule is put to the test. Though the Gryffindor team's credit, they are not found wanting, as while Ravenclaw are good, Gryffindor are better, quickly finding themselves ahead in points. Nonetheless, Harry can't allow himself to get distracted, as Cho Chang is an excellent seeker, matching him turn for turn as he attempts to find the snitch. And while at first he sees no sign of the little winged ball, he does spot something from the Slytherin end of the stands that makes his blood boil. A large banner Malfoy and his cronies have made of a headless hippogriff, having apparently heard about Lucius's case against Buckbeak and Harry's tireless work to save the beast. However, instead of making the black-haired boy freeze or lose focus like the Slytherins had hoped, it instead fills him with a burning urge to show them all up, so that when the snitch appears near the base of the Ravenclaw goalposts, he dives, flying mere centimeters off the ground as he wraps his gloved hand around the golden orb, securing Gryffindor's victory and their place in the finals. Naturally, this results in a wild party in Gryffindor Tower that goes late into the night, until Percy flaunts his status as head boy to make them all go to bed. Were this canon, this night would mark the attack on the third-year boys' dorm, though due to Sirius not being on the lam, nothing of the sort happens, with a good mood lasting all the way through the next week, with the only thing to sour it being a tear-stained letter Harry receives the following Friday from Hagrid, stating their trial was moved forward from April to today, and that they lost, meaning Buckbeak is scheduled to die. Understandably, Ron is furious since it's completely unjust to condemn Buckbeak considering all the evidence they found saying he should be acquitted, with Hermione agreeing that this is clearly just Mr. Malfoy using his money and influence to bully the people in power again like he did at Sirius's hearing. Only this time poor Hagrid couldn't argue his way out of it like Dumbledore and Sirius did. However, there is still one small glimmer of hope, the appeal, which Hermione is quick to point out, since Buckbeak is entitled to an appeal. Naturally, this will mean more work for them, as now they'll have to find successful appeals, an even harder prospect than successful acquittals, though the trio do not complain, vowing to work for as long as it takes for them to find something that will save Buckbeak. Having become rather despondent in the face of the verdict, Hagrid is immensely grateful for the help, though he takes pains not to monopolize all the kids' free time, insisting they make use of their Hogsmeade weekend when it rolls around, as they only get a few of them a year. Figuring they have plenty of time before Buckbeak's appeal, Harry, Ron and Hermione agree not to squander this chance, with the three friends having a fun day out. Though not quite as fun as the trip they took with Sirius back in October. Later that night, when they are alone in their dorm, Harry admits this to Ron, with the redhead smirking that there's an easy way to fix that. He just needs to stop being a git and make up with his godfather. Truthfully, Harry admits that a part of him wants to, since with everything going on with Buckbeak, he's kind of forgotten to be mad, and he does miss having Sirius around. But at the same time, he can't just act like his godfather didn't take this job because he thinks he's still a little kid who needs watching wherever he goes. Letting out a deep sigh, Harry groans that it'd be so much easier if Sirius would just apologize, since at this point he'd be willing to forgive him. It's just... Seeing that his pal is struggling for the words, Ron interjects that it's just that Harry's mental. He gets it, causing the bespectacled boy to laugh that if he's a nutter, Ron's an even bigger one for hanging around him. Though all the same, he does not attempt to continue the discussion, instead turning out his lamp and promptly falling asleep to dreams of Sirius and Buckbeak, both slipping through his grasp. Over the next few weeks, there are several times just like this when Harry is tempted to go see Sirius and talk with him, though ultimately his overpacked schedule more than his pride proves to be the rate-limiting step, as currently every spare moment is spent prepping for Buckbeak's appeal, practicing for the Quidditch finals, or at Hermione's insistence studying for their exams as they're only a few weeks away. Such a workload leaves little time for deep and meaningful conversations about the state of a relationship, so as autumn progresses closer and closer towards the start of summer, Harry and Sirius remain as distant as ever. In fact, the first time they see each other outside of classes and meals is when walking down to the pitch for the Quidditch finals, with Sirius giving the boy what he can only assume is a small nod of good luck. Unsure how to feel about this as it brings up a series of conflicting emotions in him, Harry decides to reflect later, as now his only job is catching the snitch. Taking flight with the rest of his team, Harry begins circling the pitch, while not far away Malfoy does likewise, during that Potter looks as though he's about to keel over. Gritting his teeth as he attempts to drown out his rival's barbs, Harry ducks and weaves, dodging bludgers and a stampede of chasers all vying for the quaffle before spotting what he thinks is the snitch. Gripping his broom handle twice as hard, the black-haired boy soars forward. Though spotting what Harry is doing, Malfoy copies, and with his Nimbus 2001, manages to close the distance. Recognizing that Slytherin will win if this keeps up, Harry makes a drastic decision, shoulder-barging Draco to throw him off course, though at the cost that he too loses sight of the golden snitch. On the bright side, this little collision does inspire Malfoy to keep a wide berth from Harry for the remainder of the match. match, scanning the opposite side of the pitch from him for their shared target. However, as the two boys will learn, the snitch is not on either end, but rather in the dead center, and locking eyes on it at the same time, they both shoot forward. Due to having started simultaneously, Harry and Malfoy manage to roughly mirror each other as they race towards the middle, though it is not a perfect mirroring, as with Harry still on his Nimbus 2000, he cannot keep up with the blonde boy, so that just as his fingers are about to brush the gilded gold, Malfoy's fist closes around the snitch, giving the win and the cup to Slytherin. Understandably, there is no party in Gryffindor Tower that night, with it being a rather sober affair. While none of their housemates blame the team as it's clear they played their absolute hardest, Harry can tell that Wood blames him, since if he'd just seen the snitch a little sooner they'd have won, and honestly, he blames himself. However, he isn't going to allow this to turn into self-pity. Instead, he's going to use the anger and frustration he's feeling to ensure that Malfoy, be it Draco or Lucius, doesn't win again at Buckbeak's appeal. This newfound determination, coupled with the fact that Quidditch season is now over, sees Harry spending a lot more time in the library or down at Hagrid's hut brainstorming. Though, thanks to Ron and Hermione acting as counterweights to his somewhat manic zeal, he does still remember to keep up his exam revision, which is good, because before he knows it, the end-of-year tests are upon them. For most of these, they go a lot like canon, with the exceptions being Muggle Studies and Defense Against the Dark Arts. Muggle Studies because Harry and Ron did not take it in the original timeline, in favor of divination, and Defense because obviously with a different teacher comes a different exam. For the former is a straightforward written test in which the students are forced to explain how various Muggle instruments work, while the latter is described as a simulation of the sort of situation the students may need to use defensive magic in. All this does sound like a fun premise for an exam. Harry, Ron, and Hermione struggle to get excited, as it happens to be scheduled on the same day as Buckbeak's appeal, meaning they cannot be there to support Hagrid in person. Nonetheless, having faith in the case they helped the big man build, they assemble in the grounds for their Defense Against the Dark Arts final, where Sirius is waiting along with a couple of other teachers who must have had a free period, including Snape, who looks particularly mutinous at being assigned to serve as Black's assistant. When everyone is in attendance, Sirius explains that this test will be simple. The students just have to make it back to the entrance hall before the hour is up. Meanwhile, he and his fellow teachers will be playing the role of dark wizards attempting to stop them, so they will have to put to use all the spells and theory he has taught them over the course of this year if they want to make it back in time. For fairness' sake, the students are then given a 2-minute head start, and taking off at a sprint, Harry, Ron, and Hermione begin heading for the castle. However, approaching this like a game of chess, Ron suggests they don't take the main path, as that will definitely be where most of their classmates go, meaning it'll also be the place the teachers attack first. Nodding, Harry and Hermione then follow the redhead off the beaten path and towards Hagrid's place, since they can cut through the edge of the forest and reach the castle that way. Thanks to this plan, they are able to avoid the teachers, though this does not mean they do not run into anyone, as when they pass by Hagrid's, they spot a trio of figures standing in the doorway: Cornelius Fudge, the Minister for Magic, Lucius Malfoy, and a burly man sporting an executioner's axe. At once the trio know that this must be the ministry party here for the appeal, and so taking cover in the tree line just outside the pumpkin patch, they listen as Hagrid invites them in and the proceedings begin. That is if they can be called that, as pretty quickly it becomes apparent that this is even more of a sham hearing than Sirius's, as Hagrid is barely allowed to speak before the silky voice of Lucius Malfoy cuts him off and twists his words. While Sirius had the oratory acumen to deal with such unfair handling, Hagrid sadly does not, growing more and more flustered, so that within 10 minutes Fudge is willing to call the whole affair to an end, and declare that the judgment stands. Buckbeak will be executed at sunset. Seeing no reason to stick around a moment longer than he has to, Lucius unctuously thanks Fudge, claiming that he will be back for the show, before telling the minister and headsman who he names McNair that they should head up to the castle so they don't catch fleas from this squalor. With this final dig, the ministry party then emerge back onto the grounds, with Harry, Ron, and Hermione all holding their breath as they wait to see if they will be spotted. Thankfully, it seems they have chosen a good hiding spot, though in that moment none of them feel all that thankful, all sharing the same sick feeling in their stomach. Having almost forgotten about their exam, the trio then head inside to comfort Hagrid, who is fighting back tears. Though gruff as ever, he thanks them for everything and tells them to get on back to the castle, since he won't have them failing third year on his account. Knowing this is probably the best thing to do, the kids turn to leave, though as they go, the big man does give them one last instruction: not to come down for the execution, since he doesn't want them to have to see that. In the wake of this, no one says a word during the duration of their trek back up to school, with them making it within the time limit but just barely. Here Sirius congratulates all those who passed, while urging those who didn't to go see Madame Pomfrey, since she can cure those stinging hexes he and his colleagues cast in a jiff. As this is the third year's last exam, there is a buzz of eager excitement when they all part ways, with even Neville, who received joint stinging hexes to both his legs, grinning that once Dean and Seamus help him up to the hospital wing, they're gonna go play gobstones by the lake. The only ones who are not happy are Harry, Ron and Hermione, as having found their words, they muttered disgustedly that the appeal was a total farce, with Hermione frowning that Fudge had already made his mind up before they arrived. Why else would he have brought the headsman? Sighing, Ron dejectedly agrees, though asked what they can do since the verdict's been cast. Though looking up from his friends, Harry replies that he doesn't know, but he does know who might. In unison, the pair question if this means Harry's prepared to bury the hatchet with Sirius, an unfortunate choice of words that makes the boy grimace, though all the same he replies that he's at least willing to swallow his pride for now, since this is a matter of life and death, and since Fudge and Malfoy are willing to break the rules, maybe it's time they start doing the same. Knowing that he has to be the one to start this reapproachment, Harry then awkwardly steps forward while calling his godfather's name in a tone that makes it clear something is seriously wrong. Recognizing this, all aloofness drops from the man's demeanor as he asks what's the matter, his earnest concern making it seem as though the last several months of fighting never happened. While Harry had railed against the idea of his godfather babying him, he cannot deny that it feels good to have Sirius talking to him again in that tone only a worried parent can, and so wastes no time in filling him in on everything that's happened with Buckbeak. Each word only makes the bearded man's face grow stormier, with him occasionally interjecting an explosive curse aimed at Fudge or Lucius. Though showing his top-notch brain, he does not lose focus for even a second, so that when the trio ask what they should do, he adopts his usual haughty grin and replies that it's obvious, isn't it? They've got to steal the hippogriff. Understandably, this is met with disbelief, especially from Hermione, though holding firm, Sirius states that what they need to do is wait for the execution party to come down to Hagrid so they can see Buckbeak is still tied up. Then, when they go inside to sign the paperwork, the four of them will lead the hippogriff into the Forbidden Forest, deep enough that he can fly away to freedom without being seen. At once, the trio speak, though their words are discordant, as Ron calls such an idea completely mad, Hermione claims that it's highly illegal, and Harry just grins that it's brilliant. Pleased to see that he and his godson are on the same page again, Sirius instructs Harry to gather his cloak and map, and they'll reconvene in his office half an hour before sunset. Dutifully, the kids do as they're told, so that as the first signs of pinkness trace the horizon, Harry, Ron and Hermione gather together under the invisibility cloak, while Sirius, who is far too large to fit, casts a powerful disillusionment charm upon himself which more or less has the same effect. Together, they then begin making their way down to Hagrid's, with Harry leading them to the same spot the trio hid in earlier, as even though they are invisible, it doesn't hurt to have a position hidden from prying eyes. From there is a simple matter of waiting, as by using the Marauders map, they're able to tell when Fudge, Lucius and McNair are on their way, now with Dumbledore joining their retinue. As planned, the group wait to act until they are sure the execution party have seen Buckbeak, so that Hagrid cannot be blamed for freeing him. Then, when everyone steps inside Hagrid's house, they sneak their way towards the hippogriff, with Sirius using a severing charm to split the rope binding Buckbeak to a post so that Harry, Ron and Hermione can use it as a lead. Unfortunately, even the best laid plans have flaws, as due to his saviors being invisible but still detectable by his animal sense of smell, Buckbeak begins to panic at their approach until Harry pokes his head out of the cloak and bows. While this does calm the hippogriff and allow the kids to begin leading him away, the noise is enough to alert Fudge and Malfoy, who burst through the door just as Buckbeak's hindquarters are vanishing into the tree line. Incensed at the idea that his consolation prize might be taken from him, Lucius barks at the others to begin searching for the runaway beast and whoever set it free, while declaring that he'll be making his way into the forest as the most likely place it would have fled. Recognizing that the blonde man will be able to move faster than they can while leading a hippogriff, and therefore will probably catch them before they can make it halfway to their destination, Sirius makes a difficult decision. Raising his wand, the bearded man wordlessly removes his disillusionment charm, then with a determined expression begins walking back the way he came. Bounding out of the cloak to wrap an arm around his godfather's wrist, Harry urgently asks what he thinks he's doing. Though smiling proudly, Sirius replies that he's buying them time, since he is certain that Harry is capable of completing this task without him. At this response, Harry is left speechless, though this is perhaps for the best, as it allows Ron and Hermione to pull him back under the cloak, while Sirius strides out of the trees and into the pumpkin patch, where he grins they can call off their search since they've found their culprit. Looking baffled, Fudge questions why Black would do something like this, with the bearded man grinning that his motive is really quite simple. Lucius Malfoy is a tosser, and ticking him off sounded like a laugh. As he had hoped, this causes Lucius's face to turn that angry pink again, with him snarling in barely more than a whisper that he'll have Sirius fired for this after he finds that hippogriff. However, still jeeringly, the marauder asks why wait, stating that as a school governor, he has a duty to discharge before this personal matter, so we really ought to take him up to the castle to sack him right now. Not to mention he'll need to bring Dumbledore since he is the headmaster. Blue eyes twinkling at this, Dumbledore agrees that Professor Black is correct, causing Lucius to order soon-to-be ex-Professor Black and the Silverhead headmaster to follow him, his usual charm completely subsumed by rage while snapping at Fudge and McNair to keep searching in his stead since this won't take long. From the tree line, Harry, Ron and Hermione then watches Malfoy, Dumbledore and Sirius begin making their way up the path, albeit at a slowed pace as the latter is rather intentionally dragging his feet. Recognizing the sacrifice Sirius has made for them, the kids do not squander it, yanking on Buckbeak's lead and guiding him further into the forest. Unfortunately, this does come with its own set of struggles and complications, as pretty soon they are forced to get out from under the cloak, since it's impossible to navigate the uneven and root-strewn forest floor while bunched together. This does make them visible to anyone watching, but figuring they're far enough from McNair and Fudge to worry, they press onwards. However, Fudge and McNair are not the only ones they have to worry about, as due to heading deep into the Forbidden Forest, deeper than they've ever been before, they are forced to contend with some of its more sinister denizens, specifically the Acromantula tribe made of Aragog's offspring. Having never met the kids nor heard that they are friends of Hagrid, the great spiders simply see them as more humans who have wandered into their lair, and are therefore fair game, and so begin stalking them from afar, their many eyes glinting in the forest gloom. Naturally, Ron is the first to notice them, as feeling a prickling down his spine, he turns his illuminated wand back the way they came, only to see a trio of 8-legged monsters all ready to pounce. Letting out a terrified bellow, the red-haired boy tells his friends and Buckbeak to run, with this not being something they need to hear twice, as upon spotting the spiders, they all begin to flee. Unfortunately, while they are struggling to avoid tripping on the roots and make sure Buckbeak is keeping pace, the Acromantula are in their natural habitat, and so have no trouble closing the distance. Seeing this, Harry calls out to the others that running alone won't work, so they need to fight back somehow, with Hermione nodding before pointing her wand back and blasting the nearest of Aragog's spawn with a jelly legs jinx. Due to being 80% leg, the spider is immediately toppled by this, with the boys cheering that she's brilliant as they do likewise, downing the other two spiders while silently making a note to thank Sirius for teaching them this spell. Due to the way in which the Acromantula were dispatched, no other creatures attempt to accost the team as they make their way to a large forested clearing. Then, once they are sure they're safe, they remove Buckbeak's lead and tell him to fly and be free. In that moment, all three see a deep soulfulness to the hippogriff's eyes, as if he understands what they have done for him. Then, as he spreads his majestic wings, he takes flight, soaring above the tree canopy and into the night sky. Such a sight puts a smile on Harry, Ron and Hermione's faces. Then, without need for words, they start retracing their steps, eager to get out of here. By the time they emerge from the forest, night has well and truly fallen, though even still, they are all held onto the cloak as they sneak back into the castle, just in case Filch or Mrs. Norris is watching from out of a window. Once they are inside, there is no debate where their first port of call should be, and so slipping off the cloak, they head straight for Sirius's office. Or rather, what used to be Sirius's office, as when they find the man, he is in the process of packing. Sympathetically, Hermione asks if Malfoy really sacked him, to which Sirius nods that it was going to happen sooner or later anyway, since Lucius wasn't going to pass up the opportunity to exploit the terms of his probation, though he's just glad it was for something worthwhile. Nodding, Harry assures him that it was, since Buckbeak escaped, with the bearded man grinning that this is wonderful news, and he's immensely proud of all three of them. At these words, something shifts in Harry, feeling almost like a stomach ache, and seeing this internal upheaval, Hermione tugs Ron out of the office so that Harry and Sirius can have some time to talk in private. Having a good idea what is going through his godson's head, the bearded man does not rush him, waiting patiently until finally Harry speaks to thank Sirius for trusting him earlier. Smiling softly, the animagus replies that he meant what he said in the forest. He has total faith in Harry, and he's sorry if his actions this year made it seem like he didn't. Smiling now too, Harry replies that he's sorry as well, since he acted like a right prat about it. Though letting out a bark-like laugh, Sirius replies he's a teenager, so he's allowed to be a prat every now and then. God knows he and James were. Just ask Mooney. Laughing now too, Harry asks if this means things are okay between the two of them, with the ex-professor nodding that he stopped being mad a while ago. He was just trying to give Harry space and let him ask for help rather than foist it upon him, though for the sake of honesty he will admit that he did help Remus find a few of those bits of legislation, so he hopes the boy can forgive him for that small interference. Smiling widely, Harry replies that there's nothing to forgive since he does appreciate his godfather having his back. Then, as he approaches Sirius, he is pulled into a tight hug. With this weight now lifted from both their minds, the final few weeks of term pass in a blur of summer sunshine that even Draco and Snape's gloating about Sirius getting fired and Slytherin winning the Quidditch Cup cannot dampen. Speaking of Quidditch, as the World Cup finals are set to be held in Britain this year, Sirius offers to take Harry, Ron and Hermione since it's an incredible experience, with the kids eagerly agreeing, glad that everything is back to normal. With that happy thought, all four of them partake in the end-of-year feast, in which Sirius is given a standing ovation by the Gryffindor, Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw tables when his departure is announced. Then the following morning, they board the Hogwarts Express, eager to return home after a big year. And that's where we'll leave things for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.